I would hope that we're following on, that it really addresses the problems and that we can start to deliver against an action plan there. So for me, getting these outcomes, the vision, what councillors expect sorted out now through this forum's a really great opportunity. So that's kind of my initial comments in response to yourselves.
Okay, thanks, Drew. I'm going to turn to the paper that.
Morning, Brian's got his hand up again. I don't know if it's a legacy hand, Brian, but
yeah, it's still the same one. Yeah, sorry, I can't put it down.
My phone's went off again, so I'm going to have to put the alphabet in to get my papers back up. I was wanting to turn to the papers that Stephen sent to us now, if that's okay, and ask some questions about that. This is a pest, not having this on paper. I wanted to ask about right, first of all, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, Stephen, about the legislation that you sent. Oh, sorry, one other thing. I noticed that the one thing that was missing from the papers that you sent was an actual copy of the tenancy agreement. And it might answer one of the questions that I was going to ask you, because one of the questions I was going to ask you was, is the tenancy agreement worth the paper it's written on? Because I know that you have a lot of restrictions around what you can and can't do. So is the tenancy agreement that we have just now for our tenants fit for purpose? And can you enforce it?
Chair, can I come in there? I'm just wondering whether that's a question for another day, rather than one which Stephen is in a position to answer now. Because what we have to do is, as I said at the beginning, is focus on where you want to go with this, and then answer those questions, or ask those questions rather. And it might be that that's part of a different session where you're asking, Stephen comes and you ask him a list of questions that you have prepared. But for now, I'm just trying to keep this focused as you want and in line with the standing orders. So for us, for officers, we need to know where it is you want to go with this, rather than launch immediately in an evidential.
I need to ask some questions so that I can work out, and so that other members can work out what we actually want to do.
Okay.
We're going to ask. I'm going to ask some questions first, and the other members will want to ask some questions too, and then we can decide if we need to go further into that. I want to go through the paper that's been sent to us, and then we'll decide what parts of the paper we want to pick out them to expand on. Okay, so that's where I'm going. I'm not getting into anything that we're going to make a decision on it just now. I just want to get Stephen's initial thoughts on how he finds the tenancy agreement, because I noticed that it's not included in the papers, and I did think that was quite significant, because that's what the tenant has to sign to agree to, and because you didn't include it, I thought that you saw that as not being a significant enough paper for us to assess.
Thanks for your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the tenancy agreement, we can, of course, provide the tenancy agreement and discuss it. Although I suppose one thing to note is that in terms of what we could actually do in relation to amending tenancy agreements, that would be, is that in the remit of the group to change a piece of, Scottish Government legislation in relation to tenancy agreements. But I suppose the main thing I would say is that, the SSTs were brought in 2001 and were there to provide a great deal of rights to tenants in terms of, but I suppose potentially that means that it is difficult to, I can't just decide to evict someone for antisocial behaviour. It gives tenants significant amount of security in the tenure, which, I think some elected members can have concerns about, because it feels like, you're requiring a sheriff court to make a decision as opposed to the housing service to make a decision. But I'm happy to bring the SST tenancy agreement with us. But in terms of what we could change in relation to the SST tenancy, I think that might be a bit limited, but we can certainly discuss that issue.
Okay, thank you. I think what one thing that I need to make clear is this isn't about evicting people for antisocial behaviour. That it's about given, you've mentioned in here about supported tenancies and things like that, and I wanted to ensure that they were robust for the tenants that are needing support, and also about the neighbours that are experiencing antisocial behaviour. I want to ensure that they are getting the support that they need as well. So this isn't about, you know, giving the council a blanket policy. Well, to my mind, it's not about giving the council a blanket policy to evict people, because, you know, none of us want to see people out in the street. So it's about giving support that's needed, and it's about making sure that the policies are robust enough to do that. Alistair, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think the issue the final is not going to be the purpose of this group to obviously evict people, but to be quite honest, I've always had, in the 16 years I've been in council, zero tolerance towards antisocial behaviour, and ultimately the findings of this, and if it's been adopted by full council or the results and changes that means eviction, so be it. You've got to, as you well know, Lauren, these antisocial behaviour blights communities, it destroys lives, and it's absolutely vital we have robust policies in place that deals with it. Absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, it might not be the exact focus of this group. Ultimately, that could be the outcome that we're all seeking, to be completely honest with. That's what I'm looking for. You know, I think Stephen Clark and Stephen did a great job. I think Dan Attle did a great job. Whatever. I think that I know where the problems lie. I've been chair of housing before. I'm deputy before. I know where the housing issues lie, and I know how to get. That's what I want to take underneath, Maureen. But in relation to the tenancy agreement, I think it's quite important here, you know, that once this group publishes its findings, it may recommend then that they be changed the tenancy agreement. That'd be a recommendation ultimately. Now, do we have the authority to do that at council level? I don't know, but we need to get an understanding that Scottish Government is a template adopted throughout the country. Each local authority have its own autonomy to change it, how they deem fit, and I would like to think that's the case. I'm not quite sure myself, to be honest with you. But I think that the findings in the report of this group is going to be absolutely important, and we should not shirk from any issues. But we'll be told whether or not it's within the parameters of the group, ultimately to make anything happen.
Okay, thank you. Alistair, did you want to come in there as well?
Yes, it was actually interesting, Stephen, when it looked at the priorities of the tenants in the points in the allocation, and it said that antisocial behaviour came a ninth out of the 11 things. Now, is that because those who are badly affected, but it's a really major issue, but if you're not experiencing it, a lot of other things are. So I just want a little bit of feedback from that to say, what feedback do you get as the housing service on this? Because I think actually this group needs to know what people do.
Are we going into the review?
No, but
you're talking about, Alistair, because I was going to leave that for a wee bit later. Okay. I was wanting to concentrate on the legislation here first. You know, because obviously the council's got statutory legislation that they have to abide by. So if that isn't fit for purpose, then that's one of the basic things that needs to be fixed. Do you understand what I mean? Yes. Sorry, I wasn't shutting you down there, because I am going to go on to the review that you're talking. I was going to go on to the review that you're talking about, but I was wanting to concentrate on the legislation first. Right. Is that okay? I noticed that some of the sorry, Stephen. I noticed that some of the legislation here it's, what was it called? The promoting positive outcomes, dealing with antisocial behaviour. I noticed that that is from 2009. First thing I wanted to check was if that was actual legislation or if that was guidelines. And also, I wanted to ask, is it still relevant? Because it's quite old legislation. Does it need reviewed? And also, the EHRC has given guidance about I haven't written that down what it's called, but that's from 2011, and I wanted to ask if that is still relevant as well. And I also wanted to ask, when there is guidance and when there's legislation, I do understand that legislation would have to be brought into the housing services, but when do you use guidance and when do you not use guidance? Because guidance isn't legislation. Oh, Charlie.
Thanks, Chair. That's probably one for me rather than Stephen, just in the difference between guidance and legislation. Housing guidance, and this is something that we'll bottom out for you, but in my understanding, housing guidance is what's called statutory guidance. So the statute itself says that the government will publish guidance as to how the statute is to be applied. In those circumstances, although guidance in itself is not mandatory, it's not made mandatory, but it is mandatory. You have to follow the guidance. And one of the things the court will look at when they have a case before them is, does statutory guidance been issued? Have you followed this when you have gone through your procedures? So although there's nothing which says that you must do this, it's regarded as a baseline, a minimum. And it's one of the factors that sheriffs look at when cases go before them. Did you follow that guidance which the government issued? And if not, why not? And we can have a look at it. You can make a comment on it. But if it's something that comes from statute, then we have no ability to change it, but we do have ability to make representations about changing it.
Sorry, Chair, you're on mute, I think. Apologies.
Oh, sorry. Is the guidance and all the legislation, is it fit for purpose? Is it more than a help or a hindrance to you when you're trying to deal with antisocial behaviour? Stephen. You're on mute, Stephen.
Sorry, I'm on mute there. I think for answering these questions, I think you'd need to, I think if we're scoping out what we're looking at doing in this panel, we need to then invite in people to answer the specific questions you're asking. I think some of these questions are better answered by potentially Dan Hartles, the team leader for antisocial behaviour. So I don't think we're in a position to answer fully all the questions that you're wanting. You're wanting answers for, but it's appropriate that you're raising the questions that you want us to look at, so we know who to ask for evidence. As would be appropriate in order that you're getting at the best answer that you want, in terms of the most full comprehensive responses.
Maureen, can I suggest that we try and set an agenda for the next meeting, maybe invite 2 sets of people along, and maybe one being Dan Harris. Dan's probably the right one. I really do think we should have somebody along for the support network. I think maybe, like say, Victim Support Scotland, they do a lot of good stuff in relation to antisocial behaviour and support, and all of that especially, but they want to consider inviting PPAS along, who the Tenants Participation Advisory Service, the council actually pays. So I think you need to try and focus on what we're going to do in the next meeting. But Dan Hartles, I think, is probably one of the key ones, to be honest with you. But have a look at Victim Support Scotland, antisocial behaviour, they do some very good work.
Well, we can do. do that, because that's what I'm trying to bottom out. I'm asking these questions and I'm trying to find out who we need to invite along and who we need to speak to. Was there any other questions from members? Sorry, I'm just looking on here. Stephen.
Yeah, it was just in response to another question raised by I think yourself and Councillor Tolomash, just in relation to consultation around the allocation policy when it was brought in and why certain things were decided. And I think for that reason, it might be appropriate to ask Stephen McCabe, the allocations team leader, to come in to talk about the process of the allocation policy and decisions that were taken at that point. And that would seem appropriate to have him involved in a future meeting or an evidence gathering session in terms of how you want to do it. I suppose just on, it was also mentioned earlier in terms of, speaking to victims. The only concern I would have about that is that if they're talking about specific cases, that could present some data protection issues that would even be potentially be an issue in a private session to discuss. So it's something that would maybe need to get a bit of advice from Charlie's team in terms of how that could be done. But I can understand that it could be powerful to hear the sort of lived experience, but I'm just a bit concerned about data protection issues in relation to that.
Yeah,
I don't know if Charlie wants to speak to that.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. I was actually going to suggest that maybe some of us contact some of our constituents and maybe they could write something rather than them coming along, because a lot of people, well, in my experience, they don't want to speak out in public about it in case there's repercussions. So a lot of people who have contacted me have actually asked that that I don't even tell housing services what their name is, that sort of thing. So I do appreciate the privacy issues. Got loads of hands up. Charlie, do you want to go first?
Thanks, Chair. This is coming back on Stephen's point, and perhaps asking you to ponder this. We're here, I think, because you've already identified that there's individual issues which have arisen. So I would ask you to question whether you get any benefit in the time that you have from going back over that again, and whether you should perhaps be concentrating on some of the organisations that Councillor McPherson mentioned, like PPAS, Victim Support, overarching umbrella organisations who can present a wider view as opposed to a more subjective, specific view from individual tenants. Obviously, that's a decision for you to make, but I'm just mindful of the time that you have to report back, and the comments that were made by Councillor McPherson and Councillor Flanagan earlier on about trying not to have this sprawl into a wide-ranging fact-finding body, but rather keep it focused and keep it tight and keep it lean. So that's something that's a decision for the panel, not for officers, but that would be my advice.
Okay, thank you. Brian, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think there's, just to kind of go on the theme what we're saying here is, although we're recording these meetings and people can read through the minutes, I think we need to kind of do a lot of press on this as well, and really put things on social media as well to say that we're really, this is something quite serious that we're doing. Obviously, there's a lot of people are giving up their time. There's a lot of experts in the room as well, and there's people that can make decisions. And I think whether it's social media or the website or in the press or whatever, I think we really need to showcase the fact that we're taking this seriously, and that if members of the public want to get in touch, or if members of the public think they've got a solution or anything like that, and even for external organisations as well who may not actually know that we're doing this, they may come across it and then that's their route in to get in touch. So I think the communication for this is, although we know kind of what we want to do and all that sort of stuff, I think we really have to make sure the public are aware that this forum exists and that we want to hear from them as well as everybody. Okay, thank you.
Alistair, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think the main thing I think is to keep it tight, regard what motion we have the expertise in consult, but not consult to the extent that we actually we can't all bring this together. I think that's the thing. So perhaps it's getting what we need for the next meeting, maybe a good start.
Yeah, that's fine. Drew, did you want to come in?
Yeah, it was maybe just to add to a couple of points. I think a few people have mentioned Dan's name, and at the council we're fortunate to have somebody like Dan that's got a lot of experience in this area, and I know in terms of recruiting resource for the team, it's challenging to get people with this skill set. So I think I would support a bit of a session with Dan on if there's a Q&A around some of that. From a strategic perspective, the other thing I was going to point to around the policy document, I think that is a draft, and the Dan and Lisa Taylor and Charlie's service have done a lot of work in it. I think there's still a gap for a bit of strategic influence there, where the policy needs to maybe the outcomes, the vision and the values that Councillor Flanagan was pointing to, I think needs to be strengthened in that document, and I think it should be an objective of this group, is to give us some direction on that.
Yeah.
I would also point to the linking, and I might even ask Bryony to maybe touch on that, because the local outcome improvement plan points to our resilient communities theme, and we point to a shift from enforcement and reaction to working in the community, to providing a team around the person in that very strategic document. So I think there's things like that need to be considered, and I would also say that there's an opportunity here for members to really prime the strategy document, which should tell us how we're really going to tackle these problems. What are the problem areas that we need to get in about? What are the new services that we might need to provide? That will come at a later date, but the opportunities here to sort of prime that strategic direction. So these are the things that I'm thinking about that need to be dealt with the policy document. Okay, thank you. Charlie, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a follow-up to Councillor Flanagan's point. Absolutely agree, we need comms. And just from my own experience, you should consider getting something up on Engage Stirling, on the Engage Stirling platform, which we used for the alcohol bylaw consultation, was very, very successful, and has been used really successfully by Bryony's service for a whole manner of statutory school consultations, which she's had to undertake. So it's a really powerful tool to get the message out to every citizen, and actually wider, who is interested, and you get feedback through that too. So you may want to think about that.
Thank you. Bryony, did you want to come in there?
Yes, thank you. Bryony Monaghan, Interim Head of Education, Independent Lead Officer for the panel. It was really just to come back on a couple of things. One, the point about the use of Engage, which has been very successful for us, and I think careful consideration of what we ask, what we say, or what you say you would like to know more about on Engage would be useful, given the conversation you've already had. And really also to follow up on Drew's point, just to say that that area of work in terms of the driving Stirling intention and the those plans, and it marries in with what you were saying, Councillor Benison, about looking carefully at the support that's available for both individuals in tenancies or with challenging circumstances, and the people who have suffered from the impacts of antisocial behaviour. That would be relevant for both.
Okay, thank you. Alistair, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, thanks, Maureen. Yeah, I think, obviously getting back to Charlie's point out from the outset about the scope and the scope of this group here about the visits and such. Like, I know when we had the homelessness scrutiny, we visited Springcare's house, and I wouldn't want anybody to infer we should do that, because I don't want to associate Springcare's house with antisocial behaviour, but I think, what would have been relevant for me, because I've actually done it myself, is go to the Sheriff Court and sit in and listen to any of these cases that are put forward by the council. And I've done it on 2 or 3 occasions. It's just a case of watching the court rules. That's whether or not between now and February there is an opportunity to do that, because I think they'll see then as difficult as the job that our staff have got to try and get not even a conviction, but a decree against alleged antisocial behaviour. That's the challenge. I've been there and I've sought in the court myself, and you come out shaking your head about the judiciary. So these folk live in the real world, to be completely honest. So, but I don't know whether or not, obviously COVID restrictions, whether you can view these court sittings virtually. But you may want to consider doing that. I think that'd be a good visit to do. I can't think of anything else where you would really want to go and visit that, but the ultimate arbiter, which is the Sheriff Court. You got your eyes open.
Thank you. Charlie, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't think that the public are allowed in Sheriff Court just now. It's only parties. And I don't think they've been live broadcast either, but I can check that out and I'll let you know.
Alistair, did you want to come in?
Yes, it's more to do in the cases that I've been involved with. The police have an involvement because they can go back to properties over and over again. So I'm just suggesting perhaps the police may, and just going back to Councillor McPherson's thing, the police share the frustration that you've just expressed.
Yeah, I think they do. On when I sat on public safety, you were on there too, Alistair. We had a paper from the Police Scotland about dealing with antisocial behaviour of council tenants, and they're working with their partnerships and Stirling Council as well. And although they had very good working relationships with Stirling Council, I think once it got to the courts, they got a bit frustrated at sentences and some of the punishments that were handed out. I don't think they felt that they fitted the crime sometimes. I wanted to discuss what we wanted to do for the next meeting as well, if that's okay. So we've had suggestions that we have, we invite Dan, is it Hartles, his name is, and Stephen McCabe. I think if we invite Stephen to discuss in the paper that Stephen's gave us regarding the points at the wrong bit about the review of the points and why antisocial behaviour wasn't included in the points, because it's my understanding that points can't be allocated to prospective tenants who are experiencing antisocial behaviour. They can be awarded if it's affecting their health. So that was a bit, I find that a bit strange. Is it medical points, or is it for physical health or mental health that these points get allocated for?
Medical points can be allocated for that purpose. In the paper it does note that we have accepted homeless applications from existing tenants because of antisocial behaviour. And also the policy that's in place now, has only been implemented since July, but there's also a strategic needs category, and where if it's an exceptional circumstance, which could be an exceptional circumstance of unbearable antisocial behaviour, we could move someone more quickly. But one of the things to point out is that's not necessarily solving the problem in that community. And then what are you setting the next tenant up for if you're not addressing that? But we can talk about it in more detail, and I think it's useful to note that with the review of the allocation policy, we're reviewing that annually. So the previous allocation policy had been the same for a long period of time, so we've got an opportunity to review that in 2022 and make changes to it, from recommendations from this group, and also from a process of consulting on some of the recommendations. So there is an opportunity to change that there. It's not set in stone, it's an unchangeable thing. We can actually make amendments to that once we've had a further discussion about it in terms of harassment points and so on. In terms of harassment points, it is in the Code of Guidance that local authorities and housing associations can apply harassment points, but it's not prescriptive in terms of they must apply those points. Maybe about half of council landlords have those points at the moment. But as I say, we're open to having a further discussion about it. We can bring Stephen McCabe along, talk about the process of consultation around that that took place, and talk about what recommendations you might want to form as a result of that.
Yeah, because I noticed as well that it had been agreed at Housing and Environment Committee that it would be reviewed after 12 months, but then they seemed to give reasons why changing it within 12 months isn't recommended. But what I would like to be done is that it's difficult to get corroboration and evidence of antisocial behaviour. So I would like to see what other councils do in that situation. How other councils get evidence of antisocial behaviour. And also I'd like to see if other councils have a policy that gives their prospective tenants extra points for antisocial behaviour. So I'd like to have a comparison as to how Stirling policy is compared to other similar councils. I also wanted to we can invite Stephen McCabe along to talk about the review of the allocations policy. That's the one thing that I want to discuss at the next meeting. And I also wanted to raise about the antisocial behaviour policy that's under review just now. I think we need to discuss that in more detail as well. So who would be best placed to invite along to discuss that?
It would be Dan Hartles. I'm pretty sure that would be appropriate for Dan to attend to discuss the policies, the author of the draft policy. So it would be most appropriate to direct questions to him on that one.
Okay, that's fine. So if we invite Dan along, can we set the agenda for the next meeting? Is that okay? Is that all right? So what I suggest that we do is we have the antisocial behaviour review on the next meeting, and we invite Dan along to discuss that, and we have Stephen McCabe along to discuss the review of the allocations policy. Alistair, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, Maureen, if you're open it up now for suggestions for the agenda for the next meeting, I really do think, I'm looking online there, I knew it was the end of the 48-page council, the tenancy agreement. I really do think that maybe Stephen McCabe should be speaking in that one, or Stephen Clark actually, obviously, because there are clauses in the tenancy agreement here about the respect for others and such like. So I really do think that's really key, ultimately, that if there's a breach of tenancy, and that's the tenancy document, that's a really, really important piece of work. And okay. I think more in relation to the other one for the next meeting is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any of the elected members or council tenants, I really do think it's important that we get tenants' views as soon as possible. It's in some forum, it's absolutely
Sorry,
vital.
Alistair, I can't really hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I was kind of looking down, my camera's up here almost. So yeah, I really do think it's as early as possible. You need to get tenants' views for whatever forum that is. I don't think any of the elected members here are council tenants. And, it's really, really important that we can't be accused of, elected members not living in the real world, none of the council tenants, and ignored. So I really do think we need some form of representation or input from tenants as early as possible. And the last thing I was saying, Maureen, about Stephen has mentioned RSL partners. Now, RSLs are not perfect at this either, Stephen. And fine, and I'm not going to mention specific cases with names, but the case I picked up a recent visit down at the Salvation Army, where there was a woman being exploited for several years and 4,000 did nothing about it. That's a horrific case. So, you know, the RSLs need to be, you know, responsible and held their feet to the fire as well. And I'm not confident that this group has got enough control, if you want, over the RSLs. So we really could, maybe a future meeting, Maureen, try and get them involved.
Yeah, but yeah, we'll do that late. We'll do that later, Alistair. I'd like to hear from the Stirling Council officers first, and then we'll hear from RSLs later on. I can see hands up here. Drew, did you want to come in?
I think Charlie's next. Charlie was.
Oh,
Charlie,
sorry.
Yeah,
I don't know who's.
Oh, it's fine. I'm not precious about it. But since Drew's offered, I'll go. It was just I just wanted to be clear, and I think it's just for David who's doing the minute here. We're looking at Dan and Stephen to come along to speak to the panel, and we're going to talk about the ASB policy, which is currently under review, the tenancy agreement and tenancy participation. Are you also looking for someone to come along who can represent tenants? And I would reiterate my previous point about not having individual tenants along. I don't think that would be. I think that would probably make your work drag out longer than you want it to, and it'd be better getting some overarching body in.
I thought we were going to put something on to engage.
Absolutely. But I wasn't sure whether Councillor McPherson was asking for somebody or some representative group to come.
Well, yeah, an ideal world, and you know, I think you give it the PAT pass, and you've got Stirling Tenants Assembly. I wouldn't get Hag involved at this stage, but maybe Stephen Clark's got a suggestion here. You know,
we could potentially facilitate a discussion with potentially the Stirling Tenants Assembly around this and report back the findings of that. It could be reported back via the Independent Tenant Participation Officer or one of our officers. I suppose we'd need to think just about the remit in terms of what we're asking the questions in order that you're hearing, you know, you're getting the information that you want. So we could have a discussion about, you know, the sort of questions that we want to pose that you're looking for sort of thoughts and responses back on.
And sorry, if I could just jump in there, Chair. I think that probably you'll have a better idea of what those questions are going to be after you speak with Dan and with Stephen at the next group meeting. I was also going to make another suggestion, which was in relation to the antisocial behaviour policy. Dan's had an awful lot of support from one of my solicitors, Lisa Taylor, and it may be of use for Lisa to be here, but equally I can probably speak to it if I speak to her first. The only difficulty with Lisa is she'll be leaving the council next week.
Okay.
So off to pastures new. So if you know, I'm perfectly happy to do that part if she's not here. But it just depends when your next meeting is going to be.
Okay, thank you. Alistair, did you want to come in? Alistair Tomer.
Yes. Quickly, just to say, unfortunately, I need to leave. Unfortunately, I have another thing to go to. But just to say, Maureen, I think this may be Dan, but I feel that there should be somebody who we can speak to who actually goes through the process when somebody's going for an antisocial behaviour order or whatever they're doing, who can talk us through the process. Because the impression that we have, and this may not be the right, is it takes a long time to go through that process. And so I'd like to understand a bit more what that process does and if that can be speeded up.
Right, okay. Thanks, Alistair. Are we still quota if Alistair leaves?
Yes, we are. It's 3 members.
Okay, I can wait for another probably kind of the 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Drew, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, just picking up on Alistair's point there about talking through the process. I think we would need legal support there, because I think it's outlined in the report that it's really the latter stages really involve a lot of legal support there as well. So that would need to be picked up. I was going to just pick up if there's any information that needs to be prepared for the next session. If we're happy just with the papers as they are, the policy review, or if there's anything more, the sooner we're made aware of that, the better, just for officer time.
Yeah,
and like
fine.
yeah, and likewise, you know, the RSL, you know, Dan and I have spoken about a few, you know, we've had a few operational issues in RSL properties, and I think that could be a, you know, a subsequent agenda item, that we could maybe get a view on that. So that was really just a call if there is preparation work needed, or papers, or if we're happy with what we've had in front today for the next meeting, please let us know.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Drew. I also wanted to the engaged Stirling. What do members want asked on here on the engage? What kind of questions do we need? Anybody? Alistair?
Not going to be an easy one, Morgan, without opening up a real can of worms, and it's how you sift through the comments. It's, don't get me wrong, but I'd say the vast majority of people, once they get to know about the platform, will give their personal experience, and I think the difficulty you're going to have is how you select which case, you know, or, you know, and it's not going to be an easy one, that, to be honest. I agree with it. I agree with the principle in consultations, everything, but you know, who's going to be the ultimate arbiter? How are we going to bring forward, obviously not an individual's case, but even a presentation of their views? It's, I think you could fall into real difficult with that one, you know. I think there's danger there too.
Mm-hmm. I was actually going to suggest that we maybe put the antisocial behaviour review on engage and then ask for comments on it. Is that what do you think, Charlie?
Thanks, Chair. It was just in respect to the point Councillor McPherson made. The digital team can formulate questions, which mean that what you get is a data sample as opposed to individual cases. So, for instance, just off the top of my head, do you think that the ASB procedure is too long? You know, just
Yeah.
I know that's a very broad question, but these are things. So we don't focus it in on individuals. We focus it on experiences, and that then feeds back. You know, your results will be fed back to you by the digital team, in a format that you can easily incorporate into your reporting, and in which will be GDPR compliant.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Stephen, did you want to come in?
Just on that, I mean, we could work something up with the digital team and bring that to the next meeting. And, you know, you could have that towards the end of the agenda. So once you've heard from Stephen and Dan, you know, it's easier to think of what you wanted to ask once you've considered some of the, you know, had answers to some of the questions that you're asking, you know, so we could do it that way in order that it's informed by, you know, the evidence you're gathering.
Okay. Thank you. Alistair, did you want to come in?
Maureen, just a quick one. I think without preempting, you know, what the common theme is going to be here, but, you know, I'm sure you know as well in your time as a councillor and support officer in relation, I know what people are going to come forward, and it's how we can allow drug dealers to operate with impunity. And that's where the difficulty we've got as elected members, because we go through the process, pass it down the line, and ultimately a sheriff's going to sit there, whether or not, ultimately comes down to the sheriff whether or not he grants a decree for eviction. And that's the process, right from the reporting. People go to Crime Stoppers, they come to elected members, will report it, we pass it down the chain of command. At the end of that chain of command, the sheriff says, oh no, you haven't followed the process. So somewhere along the line here, Morning, is, and ultimately that's my biggest concern over this, is how drug dealers are allowed to operate with impunity. But I do know the answers to that, and I know where our hands are tied.
Right. Bryony?
Thank you, Chair. It was just to say, I think that given those points, what's really helpful when you use the Engage platform is to have really good, clear but brief background information at the top of the question set, so that people are aware of a little bit more clearly of the parameters of that area of service delivery before they're answering the questions.
Okay, thank you. Charlie?
You use that dreadful term, chair legacy hand, sorry.
That's all right. So
I just had one there, Maureen, as well, just to sorry, just to add on to what Alistair said there as well. I think it's important just to kind of go back to the communication thing and make it, you know, obviously, but there's a lot of stuff here, but again, I don't think members of the public necessarily know. Not. I think some of them do, but maybe not all of them know that it's the ultimate decision of the courts. This is where it ends up, and I think a lot of constituents get very angry with us, with the police, and you know, I remember I chaired a local meeting, and you know, I felt really sorry for the enforcement officer that was there, because he had to effectively admit there was nothing they could do about it. And that was like a red rag to a bull to the public, effectively. So I think it's important that we make it clear that we'll do everything in our power, but the ultimate thing that needs to change potentially is either the courts or pushing this all the way back to this, potentially even making recommendations to the Scottish Government, that, you know, you need to give us the tools if you want us to do the job, you know, that kind of thing. So I think that's really important as well.
Yeah. Definitely, because I've also experienced, you know, people saying to me, you know, the council lets them away with this, that, and the next thing, and it's really, you've got to try and explain to them that there's legislation that you need to abide by, and it's not always the council's decision to do that, because I know it must be difficult for housing officers to deal with antisocial behaviour. It's certainly difficult for councillors to deal with it. So for housing services to deal within the parameters the law must be quite difficult for them as well. But I think just to emphasise, it's about making sure that our policies, the council's policies, are robust enough. And if it means that we need to go to the Scottish Government and say, you know, this the PPO I wrote here, the promoting positive outcomes, is outdated and not fit for purpose, then that's what we would do. We would tell them this isn't fit for Stirling Council. It needs to be changed. It needs to be reviewed. That sort of thing. So, are we happy to invite Dan Hartos to our next meeting to discuss as Alistair Tolmap suggested, the process of going through the antisocial behaviour, and he can also discuss the legislation and whether that's fit for purpose as well. And we can also invite Stephen McCabe to discuss the allocations review.
And the tenancy agreement.
And the tenancy agreement, aye. I never wrote that one down.
Whether or not it be Stephen Clark's remit, I don't know, David Wilson's remit, I don't know, tenancy agreement, probably David Wilson one, Stephen.
We'll give it some thought. We'll have a discussion amongst officers about who's best to speak to it. It may be myself, it might be Roseanne Robertson, the team leader for permanent tenancies. We'll have a discussion about it and come back to you.
Okay, thank you. And then once we've spoken to Dan and to Stephen, we can discuss what we want to put out on Engage Stirling. Are we all happy with that? And Charlie, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, again, it was just a suggestion for the panel, Chair. Given the impending holidays, when there is effectively going to be dead time between Christmas Eve and the 5th of January, we really would be trying to get something on Engage before then, so that it's up as quickly as it can be. So that means that we really need to meet again as quickly as we can, and I know everybody's diaries are rammed. But are we looking to have at least one meeting in before the break? And if so, when, obviously we'll get support officers to check diaries and to put that in. But that's the other thing we have to think about, is when you want to meet again.
Well, this is the 10th. Well, what date is we could meet either next week or the week after.
We can ask support officers to check your diaries.
Yeah.
To try and identify a suitable time, but I think we just needed the indication of
as long
you
as
wanted
it's given
another meeting.
Yeah, as long as it's given officers time to prepare their reports and whatever it is they need to do. I don't want to be.
Well, I think that the officers will be coming to speak to the report that you already have.
Right, okay. As well as provide the
tenancy agreement, which we'll be able to get to you, yeah.
Is there any other information that elected members need for the next meeting? Is there anything else that you need? Alistair? Alistair McPherson?
It was, yeah, sorry. Hello. It was just one
Alistair,
small...
sorry, I didn't see your hand up there.
Okay, no problem. It was just one thing, just to include a small thing. Antisocial behaviour can be the way people look after their properties as well as anything, and I just wanted to make sure that we have a little discussion about that as well. I mean, I think that's another factor.
Sorry, a discussion about what? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Okay, about the way people look. Okay, after their properties, like the gardens and things, that can result. Antisocial behaviour.
Okay, I think that can be covered in the tenancy agreement, Alistair, because it's in the tenancy agreement that people have to keep gardens clean and tidy, etc. So we can ask Dan about that at the next meeting.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, has the officers got everything, all the information they need for the next meeting? We do a recap of what we've asked for.
I think we've got a good understanding of what you're looking for from what we've discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Maureen, can I say a last thing here, right? And I think we'll have to be really careful with this, because I remember when the homeless scrutiny got published and it went to full council, and there was real criticism thereafter that it didn't actually, a lot of the findings didn't get implemented, because it probably turned out that a lot of them weren't enforceable. They were just what elected members wanted, right? And I think that's the challenge here, because ultimately, if I'm going to be taking part in this, I know where the blocks are going to come at the end of this. And let's say, right, and it's all down to the judiciary. I hate to keep repeating this, but the bottom line being here is that we can do so much. When it gets to the sheriff, that's it, the matter's closed. So I personally, and these people are human beings and they're public servants as well, would like at some point before it invite somebody from the judiciary along, ask a sheriff along. I know a retired procurator fiscal who came to my soup kitchen last year and volunteered. He would be happy to come along. We may want to ask Govan Law Centre, a very good relationship with them, or Shelter. People that are involved in the legal process is going to be absolutely crucial, because I know at the end of this, we'll be accused of having this has been a talking shop, and ultimately there's nothing we can do to evict people because the sheriffs don't do it. So I really do think that it's important that somebody for the judiciary or somebody that's been involved in the litigation process and tells you, the blocks in there. That to me is ultimately where the problem lies.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, did you want to say something there?
Yeah, I think we have to. I have to jump in and temper your expectations here, Councillor McPherson. You will not get a sheriff to come along to this group to speak. A sheriff who's sitting won't come and speak to how they treat these cases.
Charlie, let them retire too, and I know one or two of them are retired.
Yeah, well,
They wouldn't come to public safety, Alistair.
The other thing I would add is that we have no compulsion powers, so we can't make people come. People have to come voluntarily. And also people who Shelter and Govan Law Centre that you mentioned, they tend to act not exclusively for, but generally for tenants who are not principally ESB accused of ASB type behaviour, but it's other folk who have got perhaps arrears and those types of things, other issues. But by all means, you know, if you feel that that's going to be useful to you to guide you, then you know we can look into that. But perhaps it's something for discussion after you speak to the officers next time.
Yeah, I need to come back on that because I know my daily pretty well from Govern Law Centre. I've met them on a few occasions and we've done common things that are in common interest. I know my team would be happy to come along to stuff if it's invited. So, and they do represent people, victims of antisocial behaviour, and they actually represent a lot of people. So I know they would come along. I know Shelter would come along too, but you've got to ask them. And same goes with the judiciary. And Charlie's probably right. An acting sheriff or an active sheriff wouldn't come along, but ultimately, it's for us to say, well, we invited them along and they refused to come along. That's going to be an indictment on them rather than us. So, you know, and but retired sheriffs may have a different view. Let's seek them out. This is too important an issue not to go to places where it's not comfortable for people, Maureen. I think you agree with that.
Okay. So are we going to have we'll set up the next meeting? Will that be Fraser that puts that in the diaries? Yeah, when will the agenda be ready?
Someone from Democratic Support will look at the diaries and liaise with the officers to make sure we can get a time that suits everyone.
Okay, thank you, David. And then we'll get
in terms of the agenda, usually the agendas need to be issued 3 clear working days in advance for all public meetings like this.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can shorten the lead-in timescales if you're happy for your agendas to be electronic, like today. If you want paper agendas, it does lengthen the lead-in time for issuing the agenda because we need to send them to print beforehand.
Yeah, that's
so
fine.
It's just something to be short timescales.
And can we have the paper that was sent out today? Can we have that as well, please? Because we'll probably want to refer back to that, as well as the
we can get that printed and issued to everyone on the panel. Oh yeah, that's
okay.
No problem.
Okay, was there anything else anybody wanted to say? No? Okay. Right, thank you very much for coming along today, and we'll see you at the next meeting.
Thanks,
everybody.
Thank you.